Hello everyone. Hey, I'm a little bit early, I know, but apologies for moving the time earlier. And yeah, Father's Day and Liverpool are playing tonight as well, so I've had to move it from the original time forward a couple of hours. So I'm hoping that you can either join me now, or if you can catch up with this later on at a later date. I'm going to post them onto YouTube as well. So along with all the other weeks that we've done so far, they should be available to be found on Facebook and on YouTube as well. So keep the questions coming. Thank you very much, guys. I hope you're all surviving in lockdown. I forget how many weeks we're in now. It's Groundhog Day, basically. So I'm hoping that you're practicing hard, that you're managing to get some sunshine in between the rain, and yeah, that you're weathering the storm, shall we say, both literally and metaphorically. So I'm going to start with a tune again. So this is a bit of what do you call it? A premiere, that's what it's called. Yeah. So the other tunes that I played in previous weeks came from their first album, solo album called Ensemble Future. This is from an album that I'm currently working on. It's got the working title of Famous Last Words, but we'll see, we shall see. So this particular tune, it's really short and sweet, but I'm really enjoying playing this one. I'm still trying to figure out exactly how to approach it, so it's a work in progress, but here's where we are as of today. So this tune's called Full Swing. Let me just... Oh, it will be when it starts playing. Excuse me. Idiot. I've knocked it. There you go. What a pro outfit this is. Here it comes. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Voila, I hope you enjoyed that. So that's going to be probably the first completed track once I've actually recorded my guitar part, the lead guitar part for it. Early this week, there's a few more in the pipeline, hopefully to be completed over the coming weeks. As you can possibly tell by the t-shirt, I'm feeling nostalgic, because I know at this time we'd all be getting ready to go to Samoa, which of course is not going to happen this year, so we'll have to have some kind of virtual Samoa via Zoom or something like that. Yeah, so I'm hoping that you're not getting blinded as well by a bit of daylight, because it's a bit earlier. The sun is up in between outbreaks of rain. So yeah, thanks again for indulging me to try that tune out. It's really great with the absence of gigs. Normally what I would be doing around about now before recording is playing these things live, loads, and recording them all. So maybe this is possibly the first thing. Right, it's not really a thing, but it might be interesting nonetheless, just for the purposes of discussion, is how to sort of approach recording stuff, particularly in an improvised vein. So that was the solos were all improvised. They didn't have anything at all, not zero prepared, other than the fact that half an hour ago, it's only less than 3 minutes, I came upstairs, set up, and put it in iTunes, put the backing in iTunes, and played it 10 times. And of course, some things work better than others, and you'd be foolish to not pay attention to the things that work better than others. And it leaves a kind of a subconscious trace in your mind as to like what things we might draw from when we, inverted commas, improvise, shall we say. And that's maybe a subject that affects us all if we play improvised music, of course, is the thing about, like, because it could go in 1,000 different ways, how do you kind of know when you've got it? How do you know when the thing that you're recording is the take, air quotes, the take. I've found sometimes I'm not best placed to judge, right? I can go around circles thinking there's a better one in me, and maybe I've already got it, it's already happened, and there's a point where when you start overthinking stuff, it actually starts to get worse. So I've learned what I tend to do when recording things where the performance is key, as opposed to where you know exactly what you're going to play and it's just a question of capturing, a really vibey or energetic or accurate take of it. When you're not entirely sure what you're going to play, I find I have to rely upon the ears of other people. I've got a great friend of mine, Andy, who I believe just checked out some of these. He texted me the other day, and I get him to come round to mine and just press the buttons. And also because he's a great guitar player himself, two things happen. Firstly, I start to show off, which is, sometimes it's a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing. But you turn it on like it's a performance, like you would if there's an audience there, if there's someone you respect watching. And secondly, he knows when to tell me to leave it alone, to go, okay, that's it, you've got it. I've heard you play enough times, you've captured something there. And I tend to trust other people, players that I respect and musicians that I respect. Sometimes I'll trust their instincts, because the times when I think I'm playing amazing, sometimes I bomb, and then I'll come off stage sometimes after bombing and to be told it was the best gig, ever or whatever, and I'm like, man, it sucked in my opinion. So, but then you listen back to things later on, you realise it didn't, or vice versa. So sometimes you're too kind of connected to it to actually be objective at the moment of creation. So there's loads of things I would do differently with that performance there. But I think some of it comes with getting a bit older and doing enough stuff that I can withstand the idea that everything that I put out doesn't necessarily need to be perfect. So even if you make a mistake, it's like it's not the end of the world. No one's going to hopefully go, that guy's rubbish because he made a mistake. Because hopefully there's enough of a body of other stuff that people judge you by everything. Not that it's about, necessarily even about what people think. It's more about, I suppose, trying to create something artistic, and we all know there's plenty of times I listen to albums I don't necessarily like them the first time round. If I stick with them, by the time I've listened to it 3 or 4 times, I absolutely love it. So you never know, right? You never know. So my point being, it's nice to trust other people's opinions at times, in terms of if you find yourself going around in circles. But if that's not to judge your work, as if there is kind of the value is artistic and only that. The other thing, in preparation for recording, like what I just did there in preparation for, you know, a mini performance, I will just like woodshed a tune as much as I can. And in this instance, I'm fortunate enough in that we're doing it remotely, as I've discussed. So I've got the backing track, that's it, that's the backing track. It's not like I'm going to go in a room and play it live, it's going to be played over that. So I'll just run it dozens of times. I can run this tune in half an hour 10 times, and I can record all 10 of them. And then the next day, I mean, of course here I just did it, but for the recording reel, which is probably going to be Monday, Tuesday, I'll go for a run or something, or go for a drive and just listen back to the previous ones I've done, and just with a view to kind of thinking, doing that thing that someone else can do in the session, and go, okay, which bits are working, which bits are not working, what can I keep, what can I not, you know, maybe, you know, is there anything in here that can be you can use to develop? And you can do that with things like recording gigs, you know, recording your gigs, or just recording yourself jamming over a backing track, you know, because we do something that's ephemeral. You know, we play music and it disappears the second that we play it. It's difficult to be objective, whereas a painter or sculptor or whatever goes in their, what do they call it, their studio, that's the word, and they work on their latest sculpture, and they finish that day, then they go in the next day and they can see exactly what they've done because it's there, it exists in front of them. And then over a period of time they build up a portfolio of work. Now, of course, if you're talking about it being in the improvised realm, as soon as you played it, it's gone, yeah? Unless, of course, it's for a recording, you know, but for the most part, you know, how often do you, like, when you're practicing, do you listen back to recordings of yourself before you make the next step? Or, well, my point being is maybe you should do that. But maybe that should be what you do. Given that we deal with the, we deal in the audio realm, you know, we want to hear ourselves back. And listen, trust me, one of the first things I do, maybe tomorrow morning, is I'm going to listen back. And obviously, I don't listen to the whole of these things. Who's got, you know, time to listen to everything they create? But I'm certainly going to listen to how I played on that tune, and I'm going to maybe wince at a few things and go, oh. But maybe some things I'm going to go, okay, that was cool, that bit was good, okay, that might be, you know, something to plant the seed and allow your subconscious to pick it up. You know, of course, as my great friend, and I hope, you know, someone that you know, I might call him like he's been like a mentor to me, Pete Zelman says, you know, you can't communicate with your subconscious, you know, because directly, you know, because then it's no longer subconscious. So he says, what's his expression? I think he calls it like the Amazon wish list of things he wants to be able to do. He's got that happening in his mind. He plants that in his mind. And he said we talked at great length, quite philosophical, you know, about the power of sleep and practicing in your sleep and stuff like that. Some of it's about having a clear idea as to what you want to achieve, you know. You know, and that seems to be like the main thing with practice, really, is what is it you're trying to get from this? And if you know what you're trying to get, you've got a much more realistic chance of actually making that happen. Okay, so enough from me. I'll get into some playing now. But I'm hoping, you know, it's food for thought, if nothing else, and it might be something that might instigate further discussion, or, you know, leave comments, please. You know, I encourage you to leave comments. It's helpful for me as well if you do that. And also, you know, if I can help, or if anybody else who can read those comments can help, then we can all kind of, you know, help each other for the better good, you know. And the musical community is not that big, you know, so we've got to look after each other, you know. Okay, so the first thing for this week, like topic, main principal topic, other than the tune, to do the questions, is Jacob sent me a really great question, and he's always very kind with his comments. I'm very informed and intelligent, but it's quite flattering that he asked me about a particular lick that I played. I played a tune called Avalanche last week, which was from the first album, and there's a lick in there, and I'm hoping it's this lick, Jacob. If it's not, then let me know, and I'll do whatever, you know. I'm happy to show you whatever it is. And this is totally stolen from Joe Diorio, right? So slowly the lick was. And what that is, although I actually we'll talk about the articulation of it in a moment. The first part is a chromatic scale. Right? I had to come up with something that wasn't so, you know, with a groove. would have been easy, you know, to go. And play George Benson or whatever. But Scott Garland, alto player Scott Garland, had played an absolutely just insanely wild solo beforehand, and that had gone down before I put my solo down. And I thought, I can't just come in here with the blues. It's gonna be a like incongruous connection. It's not gonna work. So something that was less, shall we say, like obviously gonna fit over a funk blues in C. So this lick comes from a Joe DiOrio idea. And so the first concept I'm going to discuss today is a thing called octave displacement. Right? So what octave displacement is when you take an otherwise kind of conventional phrase and you move certain parts of the phrase either up or down to different octaves to allow there to be a contour, to change the contour essentially. So this lick comes from a 5-note chromatic scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's the cell. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But what I'm doing is every third, boom, boom, those two, I'm moving it up an octave. Does that, right? So instead of it going E, F, and then F sharp right next to it, it's E, F, F sharp right there. Now, talking of articulation, that's a pretty big jump. It's a 3-string or 4-string jump inclusive, you know, going from string 5 to string 2. Now, if I'm playing on electric guitar, generally speaking, I usually play these kind of things with pick and fingers. Like so. So the pick and either of these two fingers, the middle finger or the ring finger, I guess. Now, the reason why on electric guitar, as opposed to the actual track that this comes from, I'm playing a Selma Macaferi style guitar. I'll get one of those out over the next few weeks, because the tune I just played, actually full swing, will probably be played on a Selma style Macaferi guitar. I'm just using this because it's more convenient for the rest of the stuff, and just it seems to work for our purposes. Now with those things, there's a real difference between a pick note and a note that's played with the fingers. So I find with that, I'll actually pick. Sorry, you can't see the picking hand, can you? I'll actually jump with the pick and use hammer-ons. So anyway, what's happening here is the cell just continues. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So now I'm up to like an A flat or G sharp. I guess as we're ascending, it would be a G sharp. And then the next note would be an A. So there's an A. And then I play the same 5-note phrase from this point. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's 10 notes now. So because it's going 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a, it's also rhythmically displacing. It's a 5-note pattern. It's going up like it's cross rhythm. It's like going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like that kind of thing. It's going across the beat, shall we say? So that adds to the kind of, you know, what is it? It's just a chromatic scale, but you might not tell that at speed, right? So 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then the next note should be a D. I'll jump to the D here. And then just resolve to a G, and then I play bluesy. One of those kind of like dominant 7, you know, the typical thing that you probably would have come first, I guess. So that's the first part of this lick. So the second note of each group of 5 is hammered on. And you either play the other notes with, I'll see if I can move, either with the pick and jump, or with the pick and fingers. On this guitar, I think last week I played it with pick and fingers. I kind of jump between them depending upon often how loud I am as well. Like if I'm not quite loud enough, I need to hit the notes a bit harder. I'll probably make the jump to pick. But if you can kind of back off a little bit and play a little bit softer, then the pick and fingers work. It's all, you reserve the right to change your mind at any time. That's something about the way I play, is that there's no obligation to play it the same. You know, you can hopefully be flexible enough to change these things around. Okay, so that's the first part anyway. That's the first bit. Okay, the second part now is over C. what I use, and this is something we're going to look at a little bit later on when we look at modern 2-5-1 playing. Over C7, right, I can see C7, it's like a tongue twister, it's coming from two different places, right? So if I'm seeing it as coming from like a C mixolydian, like C7 coming from the key 5 chord of the key of F, then there's two major sounds available to me. There's a C, well there's three, but there's two next to one another. There's a C over C, there's a B flat over C, and there's an F over C as well. So a lot of those, you know, tequila and all those kind of things. So you can play those two sounds, C and B flat. But if it's coming from C7 Lydian dominant, which comes from the melodic minor family, if you understand about the melodic minor family. If you don't, now's a good time to understand about the melodic minor family, actually. The way a melodic minor scale is harmonized, you get a minor major 7 off the root, minor 7 off the second, a major 7 sharp 5 off the third degree, then you get dominant 7 off the fourth, and you also get a dominant 7 off the fifth. So you've got two dominant 7s. So in, say for argument's sake, of a G melodic minor scale, which in this case it is, actually, I get a C7, so it fits against this C7, and you also get D7. So that means that I've got the choice of playing C to D. Now you might think, isn't that Lydian? Well, it could be, but two triads is only 6 notes, yeah? 3 notes per chord, 3 in each. So neither of those chords are C triad, doesn't have B notes of any kind, C, E, G. And a D triad doesn't have a B note of any kind, D, F sharp and A. There's no B note present there. So that would work over C major 7 sharp 11, you know, that kind of thing, that type of that sound, you know, Lydian sound. That type of sound. But it also works over that type of sound, Lydian flat 7 sound, the flat 5, or more accurately, it's a raised 4. The distinction between the two is if a scale goes 1, 2, 3, that's probably going to be called 4, because if not, if I went 1, 2, 3, flat 5, 5, there's 2 5s and no 4, it doesn't make sense. Anyway, so, cut a long story short, what I've got available to me here now is a C triad and a B flat triad, or a C triad and a D triad. And I can use all three of them. In fact, the end lick does all three. Against the C, D, C, B flat. So I can mix the two. So here's mixolydian. There's Lydian flat 7. So going between the C and the B flat is mixolydian, C to D is Lydian flat 7. So the lick that I play is based upon these kind of Bach-like open triads. And what that means is, instead of playing a triad, right, root 3, 5, what I'll do is I'll take that middle note, that 3, and make it a 10. So put it up an octave. So that's another version of octave displacement, really, where the note is not in the octave you expect. So instead of going root 3, 5, or root 3, 5, I go root 5, 10, I guess. But I still think it's 3. And there's all these inversions. As low as this, you know, as high as this, and everywhere in between. So again, spend the time to learn these inversions. You might know it from Cliffs of Dover, is it the Eric Johnson thing? He plays something like that, one version of them, and moves it through a scale. But they've been around for centuries, you know. Yeah, Bach and people like that. I'm sure people before him, you know, but they've been around for a long time. But all that's happening is, in the second lick, is I'm using those type of triads, but spelling out those 3 chords, either C, D, first inversion D, and then I go B flat to C. So that first part, so I've got this. part, so it goes rest. So you see what I'm doing? B, then C, D, B flat, C, and then D, C, something like that. I think so, bopping, that kind of thing. So I'm hoping that not only, like, I mean, the lick doesn't really matter, right? So to be fair, the lick, it's not the important thing. It's the concepts that are embedded within it. So you could take any musical idea and displace whatever notes you like. Or you could take the triad concept and run with that, you know. The lick that I got it from Joe Diorio, I think I mentioned this book last week, Intervallic Designs or something like that it's called. And he does it descending. That kind of thing, yeah. That's the kind of phrase that it come from. So he's going 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's it, and then moving that around, you know. So even the fact that you know, and I made it ascend and change the finger in, you know, it doesn't matter where it comes from. It matters where it ends, I guess. So I'm hoping that there's some things in there that we can take. But just looking at the octave displacement concept, I'm going to dig a little bit deeper into this now. So some of the things we can do with octave displacement are super cool. I mean, let's take something really, really basic. So if I'm in the key of C, we're staying C. But I'll make it like a minor pentatonic phrase. So if you go, so say we go, so that's our phrase. That could be, that's played a million times. Of course you could play the whole thing down an octave. Or I could go, just maybe take the last note. So that's G, F, E flat, C. Now everything I play now is going to be G, F, E flat, C. But which one? I might go. Every one of those licks is the same notes, exactly the same notes. But you can hear there's a dramatic difference between and that, you know, they both sound radically different. So that's just by playing around with which octave the notes are in. It's used a lot in things like bebop to take away from pattern-based things. So stuff that might sound like an exercise, we can create variations, and also it sounds less sort of predictable. So like, again, in the key of C, if I'm going 2, 5, 1. So a typical jazz line might be something like this: D minor 7, and then maybe I'll play a G7 flat 9 or B diminished, that kind of thing. And that connection, those sort of connections between the 7th and the 3rd are a big part of, you know, Charlie Parker and guys like that, you know. Those kind of lines. Now, what guys like Parker will do, or did, of course, is instead of going 1, 3, 5, 7, 3, 5, 7, flat 9, octave like so, what he might do is move portions of that line to different octaves. So imagine instead of going root 3, 5, 7, imagine if I do this, octave 3, 5, 7. So that's our first part. Now I could leave the second part as it is. So there's 2 variations, like 1 variation. Okay. Or I could displace the second part and go, instead of going this way, and go. So first part as it was. Or both displaced. Making sense? Yeah, so that's a different line. It's a completely different line. It's jumping around. So instead of it going, all going up, although it's exactly the same notes, you can take things like, again, C, so that's kind of C, A7, D7, G7, C. So it's exactly the same phrase. So by taking each little bit, so if I could go here. Now, do I want to go down, or do I want to go up? You know, flip up in certain points. So if I play it super slow. Version 2. I promise if you compare them, they're exactly the same notes. The notes have not changed. All that's changed is the register. And this is something that you can really play around with. I played around with it and came up with that part for Avalanche. You'll come up with something hopefully unique and cool. And you know, you can share it and we can all learn from you. That'd be really cool. So yeah, so that's the first thing, coming from that tune, Avalanche. There's some stuff that I played in the tune before, the piece I played to begin with, that I could talk about to do with rhythmic anticipation, where in the melody part I'm playing over not the chord that's actually happening, I'm playing over the chord that's about to happen. So if you go back and look at that, you'll notice in the B section it's playing over G minor, and I'm actually playing C sharp minor, because that's the next chord that's going to happen, you know. So I'm hoping that in every one of these tunes there's little bits of things that we can kind of we can pick through and find stuff to talk about. Okay, so I'm gonna just check my tuning, if that's okay, and then we move on to the next thing. So as always, any questions about this stuff, or if it's not going in, if I'm not really explaining myself accurately, then shout out. Once again, you know, my disclaimer is I can't see the screen, my eyesight's terrible. But I'll do it next week. You know, I'll get onto these things next week. So the second thing I wanted to talk about, and I'm going to sort of be quite concise here this week. I'm going to stick to like 3 or 4 different things. There's been some great questions. Tony sent a brilliant question about outside strategies and things like that. But it's such a big deal that I really need to give that some time. It's not the kind of thing you can do in 5 minutes. So maybe I'll dedicate a huge chunk of next week to outside stuff. James asked me about more modern 251 things that don't sound like that, what I've just done, you know, because those things, great as they are, you know, they're the equivalent of saying rock guitar. Oh yeah, like Chuck Berry or something, you know, and that's super cool. You know, I've been listening to Van Halen again this week. I was throwing a few weights around, you know. Yeah, Jim Hall doesn't do it for me when I'm, you know, underneath heavy weights, trying to get a bit fit or whatever. But Van Halen hits the spot, as it were. And there's a lot of times when he just sounds like Chuck Berry, you know, and he's doing it for a reason. But then 20 seconds later, he'll do something that's completely, you know, for its time, unbelievably forward thinking, and we're still trying to catch up with him, you know. So the same thing with modern jazz, you know, these kind of, you know, that's like the language of the 1950s or maybe even earlier. Great though it is, that's sort of how, you know, bop players, Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie and all those guys will get around changes. And there are other ways, there are other more intervallic and more triadic ways that sound more modern. You know, I mean, I hesitate to say super modern because, you know, Joe DiOrio, who's a big influence on me, was doing this kind of stuff in the 70s. It's the album called Minor Elegance. There's a great record with Joe DiOrio and Robin Ford, which, if you want to hear 2 players who sound so different but can really work together, that's a good album to check out. Yeah, it's really good. And Joe he's doing this kind of stuff, the stuff that I'm going to talk about, and many of the things that I've talked about, he was doing this stuff in the 70s, you know, maybe even before that. But okay, so this is going to be like a triadic way and a pentatonic way of looking at playing over 251. So it ends up sounding a little bit more, less like bebop. And not that there's anything wrong with bebop. You should be able to do those kind of things. Much the same as I'm pretty pleased that I can do a reasonably close Chuck Berry impersonation, because, you know, when playing rock guitar you need to know that stuff, you know. But I wouldn't want that to be all I could do. I'd want to be able to change gears and do some different things. So here's 2 different ways of playing over a 2-5-1. So the first one is going to be triadic. I'm going to keep everything in the key of C major. So the changes I'm going to look at today: D minor 7 or D minor, coming from D Dorian, then G7, maybe with a sharp 5, or and we're going to treat that as G7 altered, and then C major, which could be like more of a C Lydian type 5. Check my tuning again in a sec. And then A altered. So I said 2-5-1 and I sneaked an extra chord in on you there. So it's 2, 5, 1, 6. Okay. So there's that's our that's going to be our template over which we're going to play over. It's rain, I think, when there's precipitation. Guitars move around, don't they? It's quite warm in here. Okay, so I'm sure you'd rather hear that than hear me out of tune for the next half an hour. So, okay, so I've already prepared a little backing track. Use this app called Loopy. It's super cool. It's really low tech, but it works. So my backing track goes D minor. I'll do 2 bars on each chord to begin with. G7, C major, and then A7. So let's just, first off, let's get our ducks in a row. From a scale perspective, this would be D Dorian, then some kind of G altered, then C Lydian perhaps, then A altered, that kind of thing. So that's more like what Robin Ford might play. That kind of stuff. That's beautiful, really melodic. Joe, on the other hand, might take a slightly different track on this. So let's take each chord one at a time to begin with. So let's say D minor, and of course, this is one thing. It's like when someone asks me, what do you play on a 2-5-1? My answer usually is everything. What do you need to work for over 2-5-1s? Like every approach. You need to really, or I would like to have as many different ways of playing over this as humanly possible. Given that they're so present. They're in all the tunes. So that thing that I wrote, that I played at the start, it's littered with 2-5-1s. It goes 1, and then it goes to flat 2, which is really a 5, and then like 2, 5, 1, and then I've got 2, 5, 2, 5, 2, 5, 2, 5, 2, 5, 4, which is really a 2, 5, 1. There's loads of 2-5-1s all over it. Yeah, and it's sort of conspicuous by their absence. When it isn't a 2-5-1, then usually you can hear that it's not that, so it jumps out. Anyway, so let's look at this. D minor 7. D minor 7 coming from, if we see it as being, I don't actually see it like as being C major scale. I see it as D Dorian. That's a whole scale in and of itself, even though it is C major. That's one of those things that's correct, but it's helpful in some respects. But if you hear it as C major, I don't know about you, but I'm not hearing against that. I'm not really hearing that. Although you can juxtapose these melodies against it, I'm actually going to do that in a little while by putting one thing against another. But it's helpful to hear that when I play that note, the C note, it's actually not a root anymore. It's the flat 7 of D, as opposed to hearing it like C, where it's the root of C. Feels like a different thing, and you'll phrase in a different way, and you'll play. So depending upon how you perceive something, it'll change the way that you'll create melodies and so on. But anyway, so D minor, D Dorian. Now, if you harmonize the D Dorian scale, So these are like, what these are the building blocks to being able to do this stuff. So if you've not done that yet, like if you get a chance, watch this on YouTube or whatever, hit pause, you know, like do not really worry about continuing until you can do that, right? Because this is one of those levels. It's like the computer game analogy, you know, if you want to beat level 6, you've got to be able to play level 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. You can't skip, you know, there are no cheats here. But D Dorian, if we know the scale, goes D minor, E minor, F major, G major. Right. So that's what I'm interested in, the F major and the G major. Right. This triad, sometimes called triad pairs. I want to know about where the major triads are, because everything I'm going to play against this 2-5-1 now is going to be coming from the major triad world. So against the D minor, I've got an F major. So if I go, there's a way of spelling out D minor as a sound there by playing just F and G. There's another major triad in that family as well. If it's coming from C major scale, so to go back on what I said before, you know, there's a C major, and when you play the C major, okay, it's like D minor sus. That kind of sound. Okay, so for D minor, I'm going to play F and G. What was that lick I played before? Like that, you know, the thing from Avalanche, you know, those open triads, if you want, you know, you can play those things. Okay, so that's what I'm going to play. So I'm going to remember that formula, F and G, F and G, F and G. Okay. Now for C Lydian, I'm going to give you the two easy ones first. It's similar to what I played, in fact it's exactly the same, although we don't have the B flat option. C Lydian, one way of spelling C Lydian out with triads is to go C, D. Now there's no B note. You'll get that if you play a G triad. Like that, like so. That's how you get that to happen. Okay. So that's the D minor and the C major. So for D minor, just to recap, I'm going to play an F triad, the G triad. And for the C major, I'll play a C triad and a D triad. What? How you do that, you know, like the phrase. That's just playing around with these things so you get some vocabulary between two triads. So that's the thing to practice really. So I'm not really concerned about what you play here in terms of how you say C and D major. You can do that any way you like. But so I'm going to keep that really simple. I might even play the same lick actually. Okay, so now we've got two altered dominants. We've got D minor, G7. And I'm going to say that's coming from the altered scale. In this instance, it doesn't have to. It could come from lots of different choices. That's a subject for another week. Let's see, Lydian, and then A altered. So that's their option. So the same, whatever you can do for the G, we can move it a tone higher and it's going to work for the A because they're the same sounds, just in different tonalities. Okay. So G altered comes from the A flat melodic minor scale. And if you've done your homework, which we have, yeah, which is playing a triad from every note, we'll know that what we have is this: diminished triad from G, a minor triad from A flat, another minor triad from B flat, a major triad with a sharp 5 augmented, and then two major chords next to one another: D flat, E flat, D flat, E flat. Got it? D flat, E flat, D flat, E flat. I'm just putting them through inversions now. Or you can even just move the same thing. That's kind of like a cool thing, just move the same thing. So for G7, right, and you might write this down on a big piece of paper and have it in front of you, you know. So for D minor, we have F. For G7, we've got D flat. I played that lick in the other tune that's coming from that. And that's D flat major triad. Tony mentioned skunk funk. There's a bit that goes. It does that. There you go. That's what that is. That's what that's coming from. Yeah. So if you're wondering how you get this like polychordal or slash chord things, you know, these two major chords with a seemingly abstract root note, you go picking, you'll figure it out, right? So this is coming from G altered. So you've got D flat major and E flat major all against G, and then the same thing for the A7 altered, just a tone higher. So that would be E flat and F. Okay. So what I'm going to do, I'm not going to play any phrasing here. I'm just going to play them as triads. And maybe I'll call out the triads as the chords go by. So let that go by. I hope the sound quality is not too jarring on your ears. C Lydian, C stuff, okay, A stuff. Okay, so for the first one, D minor, F and G. D flat and E flat. C and D. E flat and that lick, yeah? C and D, E flat and F. F and G, D flat and E flat, C and D, and then E flat and F. That makes sense, and I'm trying to keep things really simple, so the phrasing and the rhythmic placement is really basic there. Everything's on beat one. Of course, in the reality of an improvised performance, I've got some kind of hopefully familiar with these things that I might start playing over the G7 chord when it's halfway through the D minor, and you know, you might phrase from anywhere other than beat one, but to begin with, just play the same lick for every chord if you want. You know, say for argument's sake, I've got a real simple idea. Maybe because they're moving through different keys, you might want to have something that's E string root, something that's A string root. So perhaps for the C and the D, I'll play, you know, and that's obviously going to work for D flat and E flat, and E flat and F will work for. It'll work for that, and F. Yeah, it'll work. Right, let me just make that happen. D flat and E flat. C, D, and then E flat and F. F and G. D flat and E flat. C and D. E flat and F. So, of course, like, you know, my disclaimer, don't do that, right? Don't play that in a solo. But you see the point is just, I'm using the same lick over all four chords of a 2-5-1. You know, that's an exercise, and we have to do everything in our power to not play exercises when we actually play. So, of course, once you get comfortable with this stuff, you can then mix it up. There's no way I'm going to play the same thing, the exact same thing, and just move it around. Although, right, so here's the next thing, the next level of the same type of thinking. If I start to look at these things, see what my options are over each chord, if I pay attention, I might find some connections. Right. So did you notice that some of this stuff seemed like it was moving up in semitones? So for the G7, for example, I've got a D flat option in G7, because D flat and E flat, they're the two options. You have off the flat 5 and the raised 5. That's where the major stuff happens. You can also play major pentatonic. You can play dominant stuff as well. Myself and Mickey Dunn, I don't know if you're watching, Mickey, but we were in our respective houses watching Borelli Legren and Adrian Moyard, and they were firing this stuff all over the place. Although, like, Borelli's thing that he likes to do is what we say in G7 is to play a major chord with a added second, and he does this kind of thing against that, you know. So for C, you go, or some kind of. So firing these things against, juxtaposing them against different roots, if you like, so superimposing them together. Okay, so if you look at them closely, you'll find that for each of these options there's a connection. So the G7 has a D flat. Okay, the next chord would be C major, which has a D. Here's one of the options. And then A7, which has an E flat. So what we've effectively got for these three chords, so we go D minor, G7, C major, A7. Ooh. A straight line in semitones. The only one we haven't got in our initial options, you know, for D minor, we said our two triads would be F and G. But remember, we also said there was a C in there. So if I see the D minor as being like a C over D, like D minor 11 or something like that, then G7 as being the D flat over G, which gives us the flat 9, the flat 5 and the flat 7. Beautiful. And then we see C major as being like a D over C, which gives us the 6, the 9 and the sharp 11, although no 7, which is why, going back to the half an hour ago, I said I was using that for Lydian dominance as well, because there's no 7, so it could go either way. And then A7, same thing as semitone higher. So what this means is I could do this, right? So I'll do this 2 bars, C, fish in a barrel, as the expression is. I just moved up in semitones, yeah? Alright, so imagine I use my other track now. The other track is moving 1 chord per bar. So I can literally just do something like this. I'll play, keep super simple. Make of that. It's cool, yeah. So it's moving up in semitones. There's like cool stuff you can do with tunes like giant steps and play the whole song, just moving up 1 fret at a time, you know. So these like strategies of finding a way through a 2-5-1. You'll hear players like Coltrane really like just blitzing this kind of stuff. So playing over conventional changes, but not using the sort of being too tied to the language of a previous era, trying to push it forward. And Joe Diorio was into that, of course. So guys like Scott Henderson are really great to look at for this type of stuff. Schofield as well. Schofield opened my eyes to this one, which is the next thing. So we've got things that go C major, D flat major, D major, E flat major. But of course, we know that every major has a relative minor. So I could see this as being like an A minor 7 over D. Yeah, that's right, A minor 7 over D. And then the next one I could see as a B flat minor 7 over G. So this idea of playing a pentatonic minor scale, flat 3 above a dominant. So let me just pause there for a second, let that one settle in. This goes back to something I mentioned last week, certain scales that you can use that don't contain root notes, or options that you can play where there's no root note present. So if I play B flat minor against G something, whatever G something might be, I get B flat minor pentatonic. I get flat 9, raise 9, flat 5, raise 5, flat 7, flat 9 again. Perfect. All the cool sounding alterations. So if you do that, that's what you're going to get. Then for C, Steve Vai fans all know about that one. B minor over C, all that. Those kind of things that Steve Vai does so well. I'm not really sure about on this guitar, but there you go. Anyway, you do whatever you want. And then for the next chord, it's just the same as the G is the same as the A, tone higher. So that gives us these following minor options: A minor, B flat minor, B minor, C minor. And this is, totally, I think I got this from a Schofield video on improvisation, the one where he's talking about the modes and so on. And go back to our first 2 bars on each chord. A minor. Then this will be B flat minor. Then this will be B minor against C major. Now what's helpful here is if you avoid obvious blues licks. So, and this is another Coltrane thing, using pentatonic will go on. Not playing B.B. King. So these things are pentatonic, but they're not pentatonic in the sense of, we're trying to sound like Albert Collins or something. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I watched an amazing Albert Collins video this week. Again, thanks to Andy for recommending it. You should check it out. He's incredible. It was Albert, Lonnie Mack and Roy Buchanan, called something like The Road to Carnegie Hall or whatever. And if you want to check out Albert Collins at his best, that for me is the best performance I've ever seen him making it, and it's absolutely jaw-dropping. So this stuff is all great, knowing to play pentatonics, a flat 3 against an altered dominant, but a well-placed blues lick can knock an audience dead too, so it's good to be able to do all of those things. So to recap, what we've got here is A minor against D minor to create D minor 11. You got B flat minor against G7 to create like 7 flat 9 flat 5, then some kind of Lydian thing. And if you play minor pentatonic, it's got that 7th in there, so that wouldn't work against Lydian dominant. And you have the same thing again for the D7. Now what's nice about this is you can just keep the phrase going. So say I'll do it 1 per bar. So I'm going to play a pattern now. So say I go boom, 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 like this. So that was just a pattern. I'm moving, trying to keep the pattern sort of going as we move from chord to chord. Of course, you could do like what I did the first time, where I moved way early, and you may have thought, oh, he's made a mistake. I'm actually intentionally doing that. You know, that's something maybe we should talk about over the coming weeks. Rhythmic resolutions are definitely things to think about. So when playing the tune Girl from Ipanema, I might, in my mind, think it goes one chord, 1, 2, 3, 4, then the 2 chord. But in my mind, it might go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 2. Now it's moved. So move early. So that's maybe a topic to discuss. But I don't want to do too many things too shallow kind of amount of depth that it's not useful to you. So to recap then, so what we've looked at today, the themes for today really are octave displacement. So taking a phrase and moving stuff up or down by octaves. Little bits of the phrase. Of course, you know, the whole phrase can go in octaves, but play around with this stuff, and I'm sure you'll come up with your own variations of familiar things. It's a great way to root bust. Take something that you know, if you find yourself playing a phrase over and over again and it starts to kind of annoy you how much you do it, which happens to me all the time, just by maybe moving one note up or down an octave can breathe new life into it. Much the same as moving it forward or back by an eighth note or a quarter note can totally change the feel of an idea. Then we looked at the concept of playing triads from a scale. So instead of playing a scale up and down using every note, you might pick a couple of triads. So in this instance, I picked just 2 major triads, sometimes called triad pairs. Jerry Bergonzi is your man for that. He's amazing. Saxophone player. Sounds like John Coltrane, you know. Plays mean piano too. He's a great piano player. Yeah, he's very good. He's definitely worth checking out. He keeps good company as well. Bob Moses and people like that play with Jerry Bergonzi. He's an amazing drummer. He played on Bright Side's Life, Pat Metheny album. I almost said Jaco Pastorius album. Jaco's on it as well. And then the next thing we looked at is putting that together to move through 2-5-1s. Then about how you could sort of turn major into minor and use them as pentatonics. So this idea of going up chromatically. There's a nice one I like as well. I just look for connections, you know, to go over this chord you can do this and this, over this one you can do this and this. Is you could play F for the D minor, and then you could go down. You go down a tone, so you can go F major to E flat major, then to D major, so you're going down now instead of ascending. And then you can go back up to E flat, so your triads could be going down. Could be doing that against. So I'll just play that for you. So. So, I'm hoping that there's some stuff there that you could look at. I'm aware the fact it's quite theory heavy. So I'm going to give you just one last thing at the end that's got nothing to do with theory. I've got a great question from Paul just about jazz guitar tone. And I found a thing, much to my kind of embarrassment after spending tens of thousands of pounds on kit, you know. I'm thinking it's all about pickups and all this. And the reason why I didn't sound like Pat Metheny is because I had the wrong cable, apparently. And then you realise it's nothing to do with any of that. It's to do with how you make the notes ring most of the time. And I'm sure that, you know, Joe Pass, well, there's a great video of Joe Pass playing a Fender Jaguar, I think. And he sounds exactly like Joe Pass. He sounds amazing. Check it out. It's really great. He's probably got relatively heavy strings on there, I guess. But, you know, you give that same guitar to Hank Marvin, it ain't going to sound like Joe Pass, you know. It's going to sound amazing because Hank's incredible, but it's going to sound different because they've got a different touch and they pick in a different place and they hold the pick differently and so on. So this is the thing, right? It's about, if you can give me 20 minutes of your life to explore this, right? I'm going to do this in 5 minutes or less, right? But things like so where you pick along the length of the string, that's kind of like your voice. That's how, if you heard a recording of yourself playing a lick and we all played the same lick, could you pick yourself out from that recording? Could you know that it was you? And assuming you had to play the same guitar, I mean, of course, you know, I'm left-handed, yeah, okay, we know, things like that. In fact, there's a great album called Salmins 607, the first one, which has introduced people like Adrien Moyard and Sebastian Junot and those guys, amazing French guitar players, where they all played the same guitar into the same mic. I think they could change strings and use different picks. I think that was it. Right? Everything else in the same room, same mic, same everything, same chair probably, and they all sound different, you know, because it's a Salma 607, and it's a great exercise in hearing how it's the driver, not the car, as they say. So things like, consider where you pick along the length of the string. So Schofield and players who want to get a real staccato. Or the real Django thing, you know. It's close to the bridge. It would help if you could see this, wouldn't it? All right. Sorry. I'm trying not to blind you with the light that's coming through the window behind me. It's a real high production effort, this, you can tell. Okay. Right. So where you pick along the length of the string, right, is going to make a huge difference. So that's going to be the difference between Schofield, you know, like, or someone like T-Bone Walker, you know, and George Benson. So just by moving like 3 or 4 inches along the length of the string, you've got this real tonal thing. There's an amazing thing you can do to make it sound like Benny Goodman if you want. But if you pick an octave above, right, so from this case, I'm in B flat, isn't it? Exactly an octave above. You kind of like don't get any overtones. It's a weird sensation. But it's a cool sound nonetheless. That's worth playing with. So there's that, where you play along the length of the string. Then there's also like how angled is the pick. So some players play pretty angled. So instead of the pick being like straight, they put it on an angle. That's worth exploring with, you know. And I find if I play with overdrive, it gets super angled, almost 90 degrees. But anywhere in between, and that makes a massive difference to the tone. Some players do the reverse angle. Robin Nolan, amazing gypsy jazz player, fantastic player. He's checked a few of these things out, so maybe if he's watching, hi Robin. But he angles the pick reverse, and he sounds incredible. You know, like you would never kind of, you know, you could maybe argue that's a slightly unorthodox approach, particularly in gypsy jazz, but you wouldn't know from the music, you know, because it works for him. He has the peculiar thing of having to get left-handed picks, you know, because in gypsy jazz the picks are so big sometimes, unless you're using just regular picks, that some of them have got bevels. And there's a left and a right-handed bevel, so because he uses a reverse angle, he has to get the reverse bevel, so he has to use left-handed picks, and that works. Obviously, evidently works. And then the other thing, and this is where the kind of the gypsy jazz picking comes in, if you're interested in that, and players like Benson who do it in a different way, is if you have a slight lean in. Right, so instead of the string going across the face of the guitar, now I don't know if this is going to get picked up on this audio. If I lean in, it suddenly sounds bigger. Lean back, thin, tension. Lean in, louder, fatter. Thin, fat. Thin, fat. So it's nice at times if you can do it. B.B. King would do it as well. That's why he sounded so big, you know. When he played the B string, the pick would end up on the E string. You know, rather than picking thin, thick, thin, thick. See if I can, so you can see that, right? So what I'm doing is I'm either playing so that the string is moving parallel to the pickups, or maybe even lean back. That's the worst one. Don't do that. Then straight across, and then lean in so that the pick actually falls through the string, and that's the biggest sound of all. Thin, thick. So I would suggest playing around with those 3 variables before you reach for the credit card and buy yourself a new guitar or whatever, or start like attacking, you know, your instruments with screwdrivers and putting new pickups in. Because my experience is sometimes if you want to get a fuller sound, it's down to the way you're picking. It's not down to what type of pickup you've got. Within reason, of course. You know, you don't want to, you know, you don't want to debilitate yourself. But I'm saying that I'm aware of the fact, the irony that I've got I don't know how many £1,000 Benedetto in my hands, but still, I don't sound any different if I play a Fender Telecaster. It all sounds the same. It's down to the way you pick, and I'm sure before I had this. I had a kind of a budget arch top that I just got to just see if I got on with them after playing solid body guitars and Salmon guitars all my life. And I think, to be honest, you can, within reason, this makes you feel good or whatever, but you generally sound the same. The sound is in you, and I'm sure if you give Jeff Beck a Chinese Squire Stratocaster, he'd sound incredible, assuming that it will function, that it's all working and it's not, the pickups are not microphonic and all, all that kind of stuff. There's an amazing video with Joe Satriani as they're not playing like a $100, what I don't know the make of it, through a cheap multi-effects pedal through some friend of his, his kid's gear, playing Surfing with the Alien or something or whatever. I can't remember the tune, and he just sounds exactly like Joe Satriani. He doesn't sound any different at all. Everything about it makes him sound like that. I mean, the Borelli video that I watched the other day, he was playing like a kind of a £500, £500 Yamaha classical guitar, and okay, £500, £500, but it's not it wasn't a high-end, super bespoke, custom-made, rare, made out of flipping endangered wood or whatever. It was none of that. It was something you could just go online and you could order one tomorrow and it'd be there in a week, So it wasn't the guitar that was special. It was him. It's the way he plays, It's the way he plays and how he plays. So the tone. So as I say, give me 20 minutes or half an hour, and your objective is get as many sounds as possible from the guitar. And what's great with these things is, because they've only got one pickup, and really, essentially this particular guitar has got one sound. It's a really great sound, but it only has one sound. So you're forced to play differently. It's not like I can kind of switch to the bridge pickup or whatever. I have to make it sound like I've switched by picking differently. And as well, there's a beauty, a liberation when playing these guitars and playing acoustic guitars, without having kind of all effects and whatever. I've got a house full of all that stuff. And that's great too, where you have to sort of think about how are you going to play differently to create different tones. And that's, I think that is where the real kind of like beginning to sound like you happens, I think. Of course, Eric Clapton's a good example, is he not? If you listen to him playing, I was listening to him recently playing a 335 on one of his reunion tours, and he sounded amazing, but he sounded exactly like Eric Clapton. And then he played a Strat, the next song on, and I was like, yeah, that sounds like you. In fact, I remember at one point driving to London, listening to the Paul McCartney record, the jazz album that he did, and when it first came out, not having read the cover or anything like that, Clapton plays a guest solo on it, and I just heard him playing on a nylon string classical guitar, playing about 3 notes, and in my head I went, that's Eric Clapton, isn't it? Right. And then as soon as I pulled over to the service station, got the cover out and looked in it and went, there it goes, Eric Clapton. I thought, wow, okay, I want that, whatever that thing is. Right, however you do that, that's what I want. So that's, I think, your preferences as to how and where you pick, the velocity, how you do it, what type of pick you use. Very final thought, I flip the pick around as well when playing certain things. If I want to sound like traditional Django, I use the fat end of the pick. If I want to sound more articulate, brighter, maybe quicker as well, I use the pointy end and switch between the two. Some players, Borelli plays with the fat end of the pick all the time, pretty much. What's his name? Robin Ford does the exact same thing. So what type of pick you use? And I know it sounds nerdy, and sometimes we all go, oh, we're going to talk about picks, how boring, yawn, or whatever. But to be fair, most people that's an act. They put that on as an act. I don't mind admitting, when I go and see players that I like, I go and check out their pedal board and see what the settings are, and I'm looking to see, what type of pick they use, and and if I read an interview with them and they say they use certain strings, I'm interested, because all of these things, it might only play a little part in it, and without wishing to sound like I'm contradicting myself, a little part still matters. And it's interesting why you make those choices. Why would you use, I like these picks predominantly because I don't drop them. These are Dunlop gator grip things Whereas I find if I use plastic picks, they sound amazing. I'm okay here. If I go on stage, I find they slip. They get quite slippy. And also, they don't go to a sharp point. So sometimes you can use a heavy pick, but on the edges kind of go to a point, and it sort of defeats the purposes of having a heavy pick, as I kind of play with the edge, essentially. By angling, you're playing with the edge, not the body of the pick. So the edge needs to be more rounded. And, you know. Anyway, we can go on and on and on. But I'm hoping that you found something from today that's going to be of use. So yeah, Tony, apologies for not looking at the outside thing in any, well, I didn't look at it at all. But I promise that'll be on the agenda for next week. It's such a big topic that it will take, it could maybe take, you know, a huge portion of the session. But I'm hoping, of course, that that's not just a topic that a few of you guys are interested in. It seems to be a common question that I get, you know, maybe because players have heard the way I play. Yeah, it's a common question universally. So anything that I'm hoping works for one person might be of some use. And even if the topic, you know, as I said right at the very beginning of the first week, if something is not for you right this minute, you know, you can reserve the right to change your mind. And as your playing progresses, who knows, you know, the stuff that I thought I didn't like when I was younger, now I can't get enough of it. You know, Albert King and plays like that, I just didn't get it when I first heard him. I didn't understand what he was doing because I was listening to Yngwie Malmsteen and, you know, Alan Holdsworth and players like that, you know, highly refined players, and Albert was just raw. You know, now, man, Albert King's just the business is absolutely phenomenal. Yeah? So, you know, who knows, you know, we don't know what the next turn in the story is. So thanks once again. I'll check out your comments. Yeah, thanks for being accommodating with me moving this earlier. I'll see you guys on the next one, which will be next Sunday. We'll go back to the normal time. So cheers, and take care of yourself. See you next week.